All right. All right, welcome everyone. This is our end of year celebration for the first Activist in Residence program for the CLAS Anti-Racism, Anti-Bias Initiative. And this represents more than a year of collaborating and planning across the institutes of El Instituto Africana Studies, Asian and Asian American Studies Institute, the Women's Gender Sexuality Studies program, and the cultural centers across campus came together and tried to imagine a way to advance our critical work in the university and in communities. And we could think of no better way than to tapping into UConn alum who are out in the communities doing important work that addresses the goals of anti-racism, anti-bias, and other workers in the community, because we think that is the best way to show students how to apply their thinking, how to apply their learning. And so this is, a program that we hope to sustain beyond this year. And just to give you, to summarize the process that we went through, we generated a proposal that outlined a set of activities and funds to be used for activists and residents, to working with individual faculty members, to connect with existing activist networks on campus, and of currently enrolled students, and that we put out a call for applications. Welcome, MaryJoan. And we found these three residents to be exemplary in their work, and found a really wonderful fit with existing interests and programs at the university. And so today we are going to be celebrating their work over the last year, and learning more about their individual contributions to this, as well as ways that we can continue their work beyond this residency. So we have Varun Khattar, Luke Anderson, and MaryJoan Picone. And I believe MaryJoan might have dipped out for a moment, but we'll return to her. We're going to start first with Varun. So we're going to have some presentations on their work over the semester, and then we're going to have a conversation afterwards. So Varun, please take it away. Stage is yours.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if hopefully that my technology cooperates today. So yeah, my name is Varun. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I'm a 2016 graduate of the University of Connecticut. I'm a facilitator, a writer, community organizer. I currently work for Connecticut Students for a Dream, as many of you know, so I coordinate our college access programming and our training and engagement with educators across the state in order to increase access and equity to higher education for undocumented students and families. And I'll also be talking a little bit about another project today that I'm involved in called Homeland Security. And I wanted to also, just mention, right, today's the first day of Pride Month, so happy Pride. And so, yeah, and a little bit more about me. So this is a picture of me as one of my favorite pictures with my grandmother, my grandfather, and my cousins. So I think I always like to start with sort of honoring my family and my ancestors. So I'm first generation South Asian Americans. So my grandparents, who you see here, were refugees as children from Pakistan during partition, and so I think I do work at this sort of intersection of many movements, but in particular around immigrant rights. And I think I'm really grounded in my own family's history around migration, forced migration, colonization, and also the ways that we've continued to survive, to take care of each other, and find joy and healing in and so yeah, thank you to my family and my ancestors, and I will keep moving. So I have two pieces of my project that I'll be talking about today. The first being an organizing training, and I thought, it'd be appropriate to start with Frederick Douglass, and one of our abolitionists, who really has been foundational to many of our movements. And so, right, Frederick Douglass, right, once said, right, if there's no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And I think this is important, for me, because I think I started out at the University of Connecticut, as an activist. I got involved in the Title IX movement, protesting, along with sexual assault survivors, and trying to challenge the university to hold perpetrators accountable, and to also, and I began working at the Women's Center, which was really was my political home. It was a foundation for me, and where I learned about facilitation, where I learned about intersectional feminism. And I think, but my early years as an activist, I didn't really have a system. I was taking, women, gender, sexuality studies classes, and ethnic studies classes, and sociology classes, and I think I didn't quite understand the discipline that is organizing. At the time, I think I was sort of starting to, I knew we had to fight back. I knew there was these injustices in the world, but I think I didn't understand the real work, the real sort of, labor that it requires to actually build sustainable and effective movements, right? Versus just reacting to problems in the short term. And so, I think, this first piece of my project really focuses on providing community organizing training to young people and educators in Connecticut. So this semester I hosted the Midwest Academy. You can see their manual, Organizing for Social Change. This is an organization that existed for many decades and has trained folks across the country at leading different movements, and how to build sustainable organizations and how to organize and win. And so we held a 2-day virtual training this past April, thanks to the funding from the Activism Residence Program, where we were able to provide around 30 people across the state, from, I think the youngest was maybe 15-year-old to up to 30 years old. So we had a range: high school students, college students, higher education professionals, high school teachers, school counselors, coming together to really think about what does it actually mean to organize? What is the discipline of organizing? How do we stay in this work for the long haul? How do we build campaigns and actually win concrete changes in people's lives? And so this was also, an effort in collaboration with my organization, Connecticut Students for a Dream. And also we tapped into networks across the state, such as the Connecticut Black and Brown Student Union, to recruit people to participate in a 2-day training. And it's not easy these days that people are zoomed out. And so to get that many people to spending a whole weekend together learning organizing was really exciting, and it didn't feel, and I could have been there for a whole week. It was really an incredible training led by the Midwest Academy's co-director, Eric Zachary. So I'll just give you a quick first shout out my team, because I always believe this is collective work, and I didn't do this work alone. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for all these people that I work with. So just wanted to thank Najeli, Vanessa, Yenimar, Eric, Miga, Angie, who were really instrumental in making this happen with me, and are really the folks at the forefront of our movement here for immigrant rights in Connecticut. And this is just a preview of some of what we learned together. Right, we learned what essentially the first thing and most important thing, which I thought was so helpful, was just defining organizing, right? Organizing must win, right? The 3 principles from the Midwest Academy are: organizing must win concrete improvements in people's lives, organizing must make people aware of their own power, and organizing must alter relations of power in society. So I think so often, right? I think, yeah, I think about, you know, in my education, how I've been taught to neoliberal values, right? Values that promote diversity, right? And maybe even equity, but actually remain, you know, don't shift relations of power, right? Don't actually help communities that are most impacted by systems to lead, right, the efforts to transform those systems, dismantle those systems, right, and build alternatives. And I think this, right, analysis is so necessary. And part of what I sort of, it made me reflect on is why throughout my education have I not received organizing training, right? I've been so privileged through different organizations I've worked for to been able to right, learn from some of the best, but I think it's sort of should be part of our curriculum, right? We should be teaching, right, young people, right, in colleges who, you know, want to do, right, social justice work, where we have social work programs, where we have, right, programs that teach theory, we teach history, right, but how, and but I think it's so important to teach actual concrete skills, right, so that young people who are graduating can go out in the world and actually organize for systemic change. And right, because just understanding, right, these problems exist isn't enough, right? One of the key things that Eric talked about at the Midwest Academy is, right, just being right isn't enough, right? And I think that's one of the things that I had to unlearn as I graduated from college, right? Was I was like armed with all this knowledge, but there was this sense that, like, you know, just because I the sense that I have all the right answers, right, and that means I can actually make a difference. And yes, I'm so grateful for everything I learned, but I think it's really, you know, this work is humbling, right? Being working in community with people, it's long, it's a long haul, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's not just about being right. It's about being able to be in right relationship with people. And I think that this, so just to give you a preview of some of the things we talked about at the training, and I hope we'll be able to provide many more. Often only staff at our organization were able to afford to send staff to get these trainings. So to be able to, again, have high school students and our members with us at the learning this content was so incredible. And it's already, you know, I can, you know, have been hearing from our organizers how it's already, you know, shifted the conversation that they're having with their members in terms of how they're approaching building their campaigns to get cops out of schools and building their campaigns to expand health insurance for undocumented immigrants in Connecticut. So so really grateful for this. And then the second piece I'll talk about briefly is, right, the project is a project, you know, celebrating and archiving queer and documented art and cultural organizing. And so I want to start with Tony Cape Ambara. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. So I'm such a, I'm myself, I don't know if I would call myself an artist, but I'm a lover of art. And I think art is such a necessary part of our movements, and oftentimes not seen as legitimate, right? Or you know, but I think it's I don't think that we would have the movements we do if it weren't for the you know, art and art makers, and especially, right, in having been connected to queer and trans and documented organizers over the past, right, at least 5 years, right, I've been growing such an appreciation, you know, for just the work that they've created and how that's shifted the narrative in terms of in our movement and nationally and globally. And so the series that I worked with, I'm working with a few people to organize and have receiving, again, also support from the Activist Residence Program, is a series called Homeland Security, Come and Grow. It's a series, a multi-part series, and I'll go into some of the details in a moment. So this is through a fellowship that I'm a part of with the Q Art Foundation. So we're hosting a series of we applied, and out of everyone around the country who applied, we happened to be selected to receive this fellowship to host these programs that we, you know, and I'm working with a team of really incredible people, you know, my close friends, which is it's been such a joy to work with them. And I'm sad that their pictures aren't showing up on the screen right now. But you know, shout out to Danilo Machado, who's also a UConn graduate, Laura Beira Ramirez, and Anthony Barroso, who are, right, some of the people that I feel like are my teachers and my inspirations in the work I do. So really glad to be, you know, doing this work with other queer and trans, you know, immigrants, and yeah, thankful for them. So wow, these pictures are really not showing up. So at least on my end, I hope you get, I don't know if you're able to see their beautiful faces, but this is the First in the series, so we're organized just briefly, a showcase featuring Jimena Ospina, Kemi Bello, Jennifer Tamayo, Armando Ibanez, Jesus Baez, and Sultry. So a real diverse group of artists who are cultural organizers. We're showcasing their works. This is coming up later this month, and we have a fireside conversation between Alan Perez Lopez and Sonia Gunyansaka, who are both, I think, really like, some of the leading undocumented queer artists. So really excited for this. And then we're wrapping up with a roundtable between Julio Salgado, Ola Osahe, Angelica Becerra, and Bo Chan. You're missing out on some really great pictures of them, so I apologize for that. But these are, just different ways of engaging people around the country. These are virtual events, and we're just playing with different mediums for having these conversations and uplifting their work. And really tracing that, building a queer timeline of our movement and how the narratives that queer and documented artists and cultural organizers, how those narratives have shifted over time, how they've pushed back against some of the dominant narratives within our movement, right, about immigration, about immigrants, about queerness, and also like uplifting really through our organizing, through, it's really central to Danilo, Anthony, Laura, and our relationship as co-curators is centering and uplifting care as a radical practice of within queer and documented communities that oftentimes we cannot rely on the state, right, for support. We often can't rely on our families. And so it's been a project of really, celebrating the ways that we've shown up for each other. So this has been such a rich project to work on, and it's still unfolding. And we're ending with a party, as every good movement needs a party, and many parties, and a good soundtrack. And so we have DJ Funky Caramelo from Cumbiaton, who's going to be wrapping us up with a set. So we're so excited for that. And yeah, I just wanted to give some additional thank yous to Jason, Courtney, Chris, who I know couldn't be here this morning, but really grateful for him. He's been such a key partner. I've been working with him through the past year with another collective called the Connecticut Undocu Fund, raising $250,000 for our state's undocumented communities. And he's been just a real partner. And I think we've I don't feel that there's the but what I appreciate about Chris is that it's not that there's not a hierarchical relationship, that we are peers doing this work together. And Chris, and we have a very open communication, and it's been, I think, one of the things that oftentimes with funders, right, there's so many red tape, there's so much red tape, there's so much bureaucracy, there's so many reporting requirements. And I appreciate about Chris and about this program is the way that it's sort of been the funds. And thank you again, especially to Courtney, for all of the emails back and forth and all the logistics, because I so appreciate you. And also want to shout out to Kaylee at the Midwest Academy, Lily, Josie, and Beatrice at the QR Foundation, who've also just been behind the scenes making this happen, making sure that people get paid, and making sure and that's so necessary. And there's so much gatekeeping in our movements and in the nonprofit world and in academia. And I think to just be able to just have a check cut and just say, go, we believe in you, we trust you, and go do the work that you're already doing. And has been so great. And I just, and I wish that, I hope many more people are able to access this opportunity, and in particular, Black and Indigenous people. I remember just feeling such a sense when I first started this program, like, why me? Right? Like, there's so many people I know, especially undocumented people, who are working class, who are doing this work, or don't have full-time jobs at nonprofits like I do, right? Who don't have a lot of the educational privilege I do, who deserve to be able to have a platform, deserve to be able to be have resources to be able to create, right, their visions, and who are much smarter than me, and are much more radical than me, and much more and I think I'm so glad I was able to distribute these funds to, like, paying undocumented, especially paying a lot of queer undocumented people, right? and providing direct training to my community. I think this was, and I just hope we're able to, through in the future, right, really think about the selection process. How are we recruiting a class of activists and residents that represent those who are most impacted by systems, right? Because I think it's, yeah, and I think so often, yeah, so I think that those people are right, left behind, or no, don't give the credit, don't get the resources. So that's my pitch. That's my and yeah, happy to answer any questions, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know it can be a bit long-winded. So, but no, this has been such a blessing to be a part of, and I don't think I knew what I was getting into, but it's been such a joy to be able to host both the Midwest Academy training and this Homeland Security series, which is still ongoing. So just thank you to everyone who made this possible. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Chris. I hope you are healing out in the world. And then thank you to MaryJoan and Luke. I'm so excited to learn about your projects as well. So.
Thank you, Varun. We so appreciate your leadership and your, radical humility is a breath of fresh air, and something that I think really captures the spirit of why we chose you. He said, why me? But this is precisely the reason. Thank you for that wonderful presentation and a chance to reflect on this excellent work. And congratulations on the Q Arts Foundation grant. It was wonderful to see it, continue to unfold, and that Connecticut is a place for that to happen. It's just wonderful. Okay, I want to turn to Luke. Luke, can you take the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I also have a slides to present.
Fantastic.
Trying to pull it up. For some reason I don't have the view options at the top of my screen right now.
Yeah, let me see if I've done something here.
Oh, there we go.
You got it? Okay.
Great. So
Awesome.
yeah, so my project, I'm in a bit of a transitional phase right now in my life, and so I thought it was important to bridge the communities where I came from at UConn with the community that I'm working with in Middletown through my position as a Food Corps AmeriCorps service member, which I know will both feed forward into my upcoming position as a master's student up at the University of Vermont. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity that's given me. I have a little bit to share about myself. I also use they, them, and he, him pronouns. I'm a 2020 UConn graduate. I got a BA in Anthropology and BS in Nutrition. Last year, during my senior year, I was the first vice president of an organization called UConn Collaborative Organizing. And the premise of the organization was to bring together all the different student groups, the communities of faculty members and staff across the university and graduate students, all doing great organizing work, like those that are a part of the Ethnic Studies Institutes and the people who help to convene this residency, and help that collaboration to build forward into something greater, and something that can help to address a lot of the larger issues that these communities face at the university, and more broadly. like I said, I'm currently with Food Corps, which is an AmeriCorps like domestic service program. I work in a couple elementary schools in Middletown, Connecticut. I have a great time teaching about nutrition, gardening, cooking, and all the other different ways that we fit into our own respective food systems. I came to nutritional sciences and learning about food as a result of my own background and being raised cooking and being exposed to foods of a variety of different cultures by my grandmother, and spending time out in the garden with my parents and connecting with nature in that way. But I found that while I was studying nutrition, the strict hard science aspect of the chemistry and biology and anatomy that fed into that was really missing the component of food that I was most drawn to, which was its cultural component, its social component, and the ways that it is embedded in our communities and our environment that we live in. And like I said, I'm continuing to pursue that that passion at the University of Vermont. So I have this quote by Seattle, who is the indigenous chief who the city of Seattle was named after. It says, "The earth does not belong to man, man belongs to earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself." And so I wanted to build upon that concept and understand that as a member of this residency, as one of these residents, I am only one of these strands in this web. And so I wanted to build upon the work being done in the community at UConn that I came from and the organizers that I helped to influence during my time, especially as a senior organizing there, but throughout previous years of my undergrad, as well as the community that I'm currently involved in Middletown, and the work that I'm currently doing there. So my proposal to the residency was to collaborate with UConn faculty, staff, undergraduate activists, and create a framework for student-owned and organized process of documenting recent student activism. It's something that I've talked about with other organizers at UConn for a while prior to graduating, and since as a mentor of the current organizers in UCO, and UCO being UConn Collaborative Organizing. This was important to me because we all started to see this repetitive nature of undergraduate student organizing, where there becomes a momentum made towards addressing certain issues faced by students on campus. We made a lot of headway and did some actions in the Board of Trustees meetings last year, looking to highlight the issues that students face across campus with mental health and how university funding could be better allocated to help support those students. And so I wanted to continue that and to help support the current students who are there in their organizing work, but also the students of the generations of activists who come after, and who will face a lot of those same issues. The other component of my residency, or one of the other components that I had suggested, was the importance to use some of these resources in the community that I was working in to enhance the garden-based education work that I'm being done and to help establish a functional outdoor classroom space at one of my schools. One of my schools, McDonough Elementary, is based on the north end of Middletown, which is experiences food apartheid and is a predominantly low-income Black and brown community and neighborhood, which does not have very easy access to nature, outdoor spaces that are conducive to connecting with the environment, and even soil that's not toxic and poisoned by the pollution of the Connecticut River. And I also wanted to bring in and explore how I could use the connections and resources provided by the residency to support other advocacy work that I have been involved in this past semester. such as around declaring racism a public health crisis. So I've been doing some organizing work with parents and other community members in the town of Tallinn, Connecticut, where I live. And I connected with, through my mentor, who is Catherine Libal, the director of the Human Rights Institute, to other faculty members in anthropology and social work who have been involved through the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance, and just gotten connected with some of their networks and some resources they were using for promoting that cause, and shared those with the people who I've been involved with in Tallinn. So to go a bit more into those first two proposals and what I spend the vast majority of my time on with this residency, I wanted to document the undergraduate student activism. So in developing our framework, we had a series of 6 meetings between us. Instrumental in these meetings were V. Diaz, the current president of UCO, and continuing president for next year. Catherine Morris, who's the founder of UCO, just graduated as a master's student in public policy at Hartford. Graham Stinnett, who's a curator of human rights and alternative press collections and Dodd Center Archives. Catherine Libal, who I had already mentioned and is by direct contact in the residency, and was an advisor of mine through my thesis and for multiple years of my own academic explorations at UConn. And then Glenn Matoma, whose perspective on the history of student activism at UConn through his own historian work and his own work through Dodd Human Rights Impact, which is the outreach program of the Human Rights Institute and the Dodd Center. He had a lot of great feedback. And then I also spoke with other board members of UCO and got their feedback for how something like this would integrate into the organization and could help to be a model for other student activist organizations. Like I said, there's a very great need for the sake of sustainability between generations of student activists to help document the work that has been done and the groundwork that's been laid for those who continue to come after. And then without the mutual collaboration between university staff and undergraduates, it's incredibly difficult to do that because you need to be able to collect the information and all the documentation that students are producing as student activists. All the pictures that they're taking at protests, the things that are going into their social media that the Dodd Center can't pull from, all the things that might end up being published online by the Daily Campus that don't end up going into the archives, because it's only the print versions of the Daily Campus that end up being archived. And those are the things that are going to last decades or more for future student activists to be able to see what has been done on campus and to address some of these issues that unfortunately I'm sure will persist as they have for years prior. So we needed some examples of other student activism archiving. So we drew from the experiences and work of Interference Archive in New York City and Project Stand, which its mission is to document student activism work. And we ended up developing a framework for student activism history. And figured out that one of the best ways that we could do this and have it really be student-led was to have a submission form and make it as open source as possible, and to have it facilitated by a student organization like UCO. And with UCO's mission, we thought it was a great organization to help implement this model and to help show how it could work for other organizations to help document the work that they're doing, and help activist organizations on campus to have a longer lifespan, like a cappella groups that have been around generations and other groups that just have this culture around them that really sustains them. And it's important to have that culture if you don't have the documentation of the importance of the real groundwork that you're doing. So this submission form, we understood that it was important to have people consent to the material that they're giving away, because there's so many implications to this material being used publicly or being held by a state entity like the university. So it needs to be understood by people who are submitting material to Student Archive to that this material be accessible by administrators, potentially even the police if there's for protests on campus and such. So we wanted, it needs to be as upfront as possible what this material is being used for, and where it will end up being, where it will end up going, how it will end up being labeled, and how it will end up being tagged for, to know how it's, what ended up happening, the context of whatever videos or photos or other forms of documentation that are being submitted. So depending on what these submissions are consented to being used for, we have these submissions will go from an archival drive to a more public facing drive that is like view only and can be accessible to the public. And then these can be used by an organization like the Human Rights Institute in collaboration events with UCO, can be used in promotional material and social media by these organizations to share about what has been going on and to create the case and the narrative for continuing the history of great activism work that has been done at UConn. And then there's a physical hard drive if they consent to not having this material being used publicly and just going into the university archives for future students. And while there are barriers for stuff in the archives then being used publicly, it will be able to be transferred to them in a more private manner after X amount of time to be able to be referred back to years down the road. So the current organizers in UCO did put together their elections this spring and created this description for what their new historian position would be. The historian is meant to maintain this historical archive and works in collaboration with the secretary to help document what's going on within the organization with a real strong intent of helping to preserve that information and helping to weave it into this ongoing narrative of activism work that is being done on campus. And they're supposed to collaborate with other student organizations on campus to help make sure that this archive and this information that's being held onto is as comprehensive as possible. So they went through their elections, and Michio Agresta is going to be the organization's new treasurer and historian, and they've got a great incoming executive board of new undergraduate students who are ready to hit the ground running with UCO in the following year, and to see what great work that they can build on from this year's Black Liberation Night School and other ways that they've taken advantage of the virtual environment of the pandemic to continue to organize as students. So moving forward from that, it's important to document the history of our work and what we're doing, but I also saw it as important to really build on the current work and establish a place for the students that I'm working with now to enjoy the present and to connect with the garden and the spaces that they're in. So I saw this quote from the movie High Life just recently. This quote from Andre 3000's character. He says, "This little garden is teaching me to enjoy the present. Nothing else really matters, man." And I think understanding the value of living in the present and connecting with those around you and building community with through our social connections, but also through the environment that we live in, is so crucial to the organizing work that we do. So I used a lot of the funding and resources that I got through this program to be able to improve our garden-based education and build upon our garden spaces at the schools. So a little bit really goes a long way. As an AmeriCorps service member, the stipended pay, there's not a whole lot of funding available to us to begin with. And to be able to put some of that funding into real like physical ways to improve our community spaces and to encourage the teachers that we work with to use the garden spaces more for lessons and to bring their students outside to really connect with the environment and the plants around them that literally fuel them through their day, and help them to be able to learn is really, really crucial. So use the funding to, through Lemec Farms here in Tolland, I was able to purchase a bunch of transplants to really jumpstart our school gardens, because otherwise I would have had to start from seeds without some additional funding. And we were able to have some school-wide planting days in both of our schools' garden during Earth Week. So it was really just like wonderful to have all the students joining me outside and helping me to just put their hands in the ground and get their hands in the dirt. And then having this additional funding really like freed up the ability for me to buy extra art supplies, in addition to the other supplies that I need for my classes, to collaborate with the art teacher in the school at McDonough to paint our garden beds and our compost bins at the school garden and really liven up the space to make it more attractive and to draw people into what the like revolutionary importance of the ground and what being able to sustain ourselves within our community can do for us. So this, yeah, I mean, like Varun said, art is such a crucial part of the revolution. So this was like really a joy to be able to partner with the art teacher to do. I was also able to use some of the funding to get supplies to create some anchors of concrete for our new picnic tables that some staff at our school had purchased. And unfortunately, living in a lower income community, there are people who aren't able to afford outdoor spaces at their own apartments and where they rent in the area. And so people will take advantage of the furniture and ways to improve their own living spaces. So we wanted to ensure that these tables would stick around for the school to enjoy. But while the school is next to spaces maintained by Parks and Recreation, they would be there for people throughout the summer and students who come around after school to use as they're on the basketball court or playing in the playground. So that security was helpful for us to be able to put those tables wherever we wanted in these spaces. And in addition to that, I ordered some benches with some in-ground anchors to help better define these spaces, because it's really hard to teach in a school garden when it's nestled within a parking lot and you have kids running around first like kindergarten through 5th grade, sitting in the street for their coloring and all of that. So helping to better define the space and help students to realize that this is a space for us to settle down and learn and be in the moment, rather than being distracted by the ongoings of everything happening around us, is really important in a neighborhood like that where we don't have the open space and the quiet to be able to do so. It also just provides the seating so that we can settle down into the space and get our mind into learning about the plants and the scientific basis of how we are fed, where our food comes from, and the social implications of all those things and all those systems as well as all the racial injustice faced by neighborhoods such as where McDonough School is, through Connecticut's history of redlining and ongoing issues of economic injustice. So I included a bunch of pictures that I wanted to share. So this was what we were able to do with some of those transplants in our garden at Farm Hill. You can see it's all dug up on the left from, partly from students just digging in the beds, but we were also planting some tulip bulbs back in January. Those tulips just like really came up and bloomed, and I had a number of teachers telling me recently about how much it reminded them of the value of this outdoor space and the importance of nature and remaining in the present. And we're also able to plant a wide variety of produce, leafy greens and strawberries and different squashes and broccoli and other root vegetables like radishes and carrots and onions, that the students were all psyched to be able to see come up and are able to start harvesting this week and in the coming weeks as the school year closes out. So that's been really valuable, and being able to jumpstart our growing season like that has been really helpful from an educational perspective. Having so much more variety in the garden rather than just the growing seedlings, to be able to show the whole life cycle of the plant and help students to connect to nature and where their food actually comes from. So similarly, that's what we did in McDonough Garden. You can see some of the beds that we had transplanted some of those plants into. We had a lot of the same veggies put in at McDonough. And you can see, especially in that top left picture, how it's just right in the parking lot there. And so it's really important for us to be able to draw people into that space and make it a good learning space for the students. So this is the space that I was given as a service member coming into my AmeriCorps program. We had garden beds that are in desperate need of repairs. And it's just a generally gray and not very not very attractive space for the school staff to be able to use, for students to want to spend time in and learn from. And then there's this open space on the other side of the building that me and some STEM coaches and other professionals in the school thought had a lot of potential to be used as an outdoor classroom space. So we were able to build on that as well. So these were as the result of that outdoor art class, painting activity in the school garden. You can see just how much it livens up the space and really bring students in, and the students had so much fun being able to invest themselves in this. And it was so fun hearing stories from the fifth graders who'll be leaving the school this year, talking about how they actually wanted to come back to the school next year so that they could see the flower beds that they had painted and for future students in coming years. This was an example of some of those anchors that I was able to create for the picnic tables in the outdoor classroom space, growing outdoor classroom space in the school garden, so that we could have tables right where we wanted them for a flat space for lessons and to be able to work with students. So I put that together last week, and the space on the left is that outdoor classroom space. We had the tent rented by the school district for to give us some more outdoor spaces during COVID, because students have been spending so much of their time behind screens learning. It was just so important for them to be able to get out. And then you can see we were able to place the picnic table in the garden on the right as well. Then lastly, I used a lot of my funds to be able to purchase these new benches. I got 2 4-foot long benches and 2 6-foot long benches that will be coming in at the end of the school year. And so I'll be in the school over the summer anyway to maintain the gardens and we'll also be assembling and installing those benches, which we'll put alongside the like L shape on the right-hand side and the garden space, and then next to the sidewalk, where in the front here on the left-hand picture to help enclose our outdoor classroom space there as well. So this was a bit of something that I had learned as a result of being a teacher during the pandemic, and also growing as a gardener and as a teacher, that gardening is not always easy, especially when you're starting things from seeds and don't have the space or the lighting in your school to be able to grow and foster and care for these plants that you want your students to learn from. And as a teacher, it can be hard, but it matters, and it's important to be doing every day. And I think it's just as relevant to this residency program that UConn is investing its resources and thinking deliberately about where its support goes and the communities that it can impact every single day, because it matters. And regardless of the difficulty of trying to challenge the status quo and the norms of how institutions hoard their resources. So feedback that I had for the program, I included this diagram of the three sisters on the right because it's just such a crucial ecological example of the support within communities. And so I think some streamlining of access to funding and resources could be useful for future residents as this program rolls forward, and can make it more accessible for maybe residents who don't have as much flexibility in their work as I do, or who are potentially working multiple jobs, like a lot of the people that I know who are doing so much of the groundwork and mutual aid organizing in Middletown and doing all this work. So as convenient as the resources provided by UConn can be, the better for those organizers. I think being able to build a stronger connection to the faculty supporting the program is really vital, especially for people who don't have connections to UConn's institutions that are pre-existing. I had a very strong connection with the UConn community through UCO and through my relationship with Kathy Libal. And I think that having a stronger community being more intentionally built by the residency program could help connect people who don't have the privilege of being connected to UConn as an institution. And I think having an in-person component to the residency to help introduce and build those connections to begin with, but also as a part of the events and things that residents are able to put on. I think that should be strongly encouraged and can help build them. Yeah, and I think as this residency program continues to exist longer, its name and its recognition will continue to grow through activists like Varun and MaryJoan and I, as we are able to spread the word about things what we're able to do as UConn reallocates some of these resources. But I think there is also room for some intentional outreach into communities and to connect with people who, like Varun said, who ultimately need these resources some more and are doing some really important work. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you so much, Luke, for sharing the photos of the gardens and how you've been able to restructure their space and generate such, such lively, connections. It's just wonderful to see, and the infrastructure you helped to build for UConn's activist community is just tremendous. So I look forward to seeing that thrive onward. I want to turn now to MaryJoan. Will you take the stage now and share a bit about your experience this last semester?
Can I interrupt to ask
Sure.
for a time check? My understanding was this meeting was supposed to end at 10, and I'm just also need to know when MaryJoan has to be at work.
Yeah, let's.
I'm just gonna plow through. I don't even know what time it is. Oh, it's 10. It's okay. We're good. We're good. Thank you for checking, Anne, because I was wondering what time it was. Also, I wasn't even paying attention to time because this was so interesting. We're good for a few more minutes.
Okay.
So I want to say good morning, and I want to thank Jason and Anne for allowing me this opportunity. When you contacted me at the end of December, or no, end of November, I was like in a kind of a low point in my professional work. And I was like, wow, this is great to look forward to for next semester. And I really appreciate being part of this. And secondly, I really want to thank Varun and Luke for your incredible work. I was just sitting here being blown away and very impressed with your dedication, your creativity, your hard work, because we're all interconnected. Even if all of our projects are totally different, we're interconnected, because I feel that, and it's a long haul. Nothing's going to be resolved in a day. Nothing grows in a day. It's very humbling. Our work is very humbling, and that's what I tell people all the time. In addition to being a long haul, I'm going to get to this later, but my project is like the other side of the other side. When seasonal workers and migrants arrive here on US soil, part of their journey's done, but the next part begins. And I think sometimes people here forget that. Like, this is a long haul. Just because they're here doesn't mean they don't need anything, or that that their learning isn't gonna start from day one arriving here. So, and having relationships with people, nothing works, nothing, no matter what we're doing. If you don't have relationship with the people that you're working with, our collaborators, the people who are teaching us, like Varun said, we learn a lot from the people we're working with, and accessing resources. I mean, Luke is right on with that. You make relationships with people who care about what we do. And that's gratefully what's happened to me over the past 10 years or 11 years. I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I didn't make relationships, or if I didn't keep plugging along, even though there were times at some points when I didn't think that anybody really cared about what I was doing. But yet I still showed up. And that's how I met Anne at a conference in November, probably 4 or 5 years ago at Trinity. I mean, you just got to keep going, because you don't know what's going to happen the next day. So thank you for all of that, ladies and gentlemen. So what I do is, and Anne, are you going to jump in at some point?
Yes.
Or do you want to go first?
I mean, see, the difference is that I'm in the room with you, and Luke and Varun don't have their faculty advisors in the room, so we can kind of tag team. That was our plan, actually. But why don't you just talk a little bit about the 2 areas of work that you do, and then I'll talk about how that plugged into UConn.
That would be helpful. Okay, keep me on track. So the 2 areas of work that I do, and long story short, in the end of the summer of 2009, I'm a social worker. I got my MSW. So, but a lot of times I'm in between jobs, and that summer I was. And so I live in South Glastonbury, and I visited one of the farm owners to see if she needed any extra help or whatever for end of August into the fall. And she scooped me up right away. She has gentlemen that work for her from Central Mexico, and this was back in 2009 when farmers markets were starting to get really popular, and the guys were loading and unloading trucks going to 13 different farmers markets all over the state, you know, from Avon all the way down to Westport. So she's like, I need you to help the guys load, unload a truck, go to market, and be an interpreter when you need to be, because a lot of the customers and clients have questions about what we do and what the produce is and stuff like that. You know, how do you freeze blueberries? And the guys are very, very humble and shy. And some of them didn't even know English. They just, you know, did enough to make the money transaction. You know, and go from there, but not really engage with the clients. And that's what the owner wanted. So that's how it all began. And I went back in 2010 for the summer season. And unfortunately, back then, probably half of the men would go home, more than half would go home for winter to be with their families, and then have to make that treacherous journey crossing over in the spring, crossing through the desert to get back here to work. And June of 2010, so it'll be 11 years now, one of our guys didn't make it back. And I was deeply, deeply troubled by that. And I said to myself, no more death, not one more death. This is insane. And I had gotten to know the guys, and just by traveling in the trucks with them and building that relationship, you know, they saw me in no time at all, not from like this person here in town who could, you know, could be perceived as having a privileged life or whatever, like working with me and doing stuff like that, but getting to know each other as people. Where did we come from? Who is your family? What are you sacrificing to be here? And with Carlos dying that summer, or that spring rather, in the desert alone, that really took it home for me. So I started doing more reading, more research, and 2012, I ended up out in the desert myself with a group from Tucson called No More Deaths. And I was on a spring break trip. Little did I know I was the old lady on the trip. I was old enough to be their mother, but I was with a bunch of college students from out west, and No More Deaths volunteers who are also very, very passionate. They remind me of Varun, always pushing the envelope, always making our presence known, and always getting the job done. So I did spend about 10 days out in the desert with them, putting out water, proteins, and blankets and things like that. And it blossomed from there, and my life changed. And the one thing they asked us to do at the end of the time was to bring the message home. And for a long time, I was the only person from Connecticut going out there doing this. And so therein started my work here in Connecticut. So trying to be that bridge between both sides of the border. You know, what is life like for them on the Mexico side? What is life like for them here on the US side? So I started doing a lot of presentations and slideshows and bringing things back with me to sell here and send the money back to them. And, you know, because I eventually got involved with another organization that has a shelter for migrants on the Mexico side. And I've been going back there every year since. 2013, I was in between jobs again, so I got to spend about 5 months out there as a long-term volunteer for No More Deaths. And I connected with other organizations and other people, and that changed my life. And so every time I come back here, I just built on from the last trip. So specifically, you know, I have groups I can list, but that would be boring. There's groups that I'm in contact with at the Texas border, Arizona border, and then here, making the connection here was really important, because as the guys got to know me and trust me, I also joined the Yukon Health Center, their mobile farm clinic with the medical students, and as an interpreter. So that started June 2011, and Varun just sent me a chat. I remember it was 2012 that we met back then. So our paths have crossed. And I feel like, as an aside with Luke, I used to work in Middletown in the North End at CHC, and I had friends that worked at McDonough, and one of the farmers markets that we went to was Rose's Berry Farm. We would do our produce there. And even just taking time out from a busy 4-hour market, like little kids would come from the community program with their little coins, and they'd want to know how much they could buy with how many coins they had. And so I would just step away, and we would do simple math, or I would like encourage them to buy something they hadn't tried before. You know, it's like white raspberries. They didn't know what that was, or a certain kind of vegetable. I said, bring this home to mommy. She might like that. You know what I mean? So just that little piece right there. I mean, I knew that there was potential in that neighborhood, and I'm so glad that you're there doing it. And the farmers market's still going on this year, you know, because the virus is over. So it'll be Friday afternoons. Look out for that. So anyways, I got involved with the mobile clinic and got to know people at UConn, and also more importantly, the outreach worker for community health services in North End of Hartford. She's a Jamaican woman, and she works night and day making sure that every single worker who wants a medical appointment or needs prevention care or aftercare, no matter what farm they work on in any part of the state, she makes sure that they get there. And it's not all Hartford. I mean, also there's a clinic in Middletown. There's one up in Enfield, in New Britain, so that they can far reach out to all the farms where workers are offered blood pressure checks, sugar checks for diabetes, and physical therapy students would be teaching them about different exercises and things they can do for their muscles. And so, you know, to try and prevent injuries or more pain that, you know, they're already sore. So you don't want to add more pain to that. So I was part of that for every summer, and the symposium that UConn does every June. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it last June, and we're not doing it this June either, but through the connections, we keep the work going. So locally, over time, the guys will come to me, not only when they need an appointment, but if there's something going on at home, back home in Mexico or Guatemala, can you help me with this or help me with that? Or if legal assistance, or just basic psychosocial connecting. They're very, very isolated here, and they tend to stick together because that's how we all survive, and just live under the radar. But as time went on, I noticed here in South Glastonbury, you know, the workers are very respected, and they're part of, the owners consider them part of family. And so when I asked these guys, like, out of all the states you've worked in, where do you feel the best? Where do you feel is better working environment? And they always say Connecticut. And we're blessed with that because we have owners who get it. And also over time, I've done presentations for the owners. And back in 2018, we had 2 graduate students from Columbia who did a documentary. They didn't know where they were going to head with it. They just reached out to a couple farms. You know, they came up from New York City, met the owner of Roses, introduced them to me, and the rest was history. And they went on to win an award in the film industry for short films, international short film documentary. And that put there's one man that she focused on that put him in a different position, but in a way that he could express all of the feelings and thoughts that all of the guys have, about sacrificing time away from your family and missing events back home, like birth of your child, or a funeral, or just anything that they're missing back home during the 8 or 9 months that they're here. So, you know, locally, I've had the chance to get involved with things and make connections with people, and just assist in any way that I can. We do an opening of the season ceremony and a blessing, and we have an end that we usually do that in May, and then in November we do a closing down of the season, and it's appreciation day for the workers. You know, they don't like the spotlight, they don't like, you know, the attention, but I feel like in community building, it's an important thing to do, because we have people from different churches that show up. We have people, the owners come, and it's just our way in the community of saying thank you. Thank you for the food that you put on our table, and thank you for the sacrifices you've made away from your family. So that's a really, really condensed version. Anne, you can take it over.
It sure is. Well, you can all see why I admire MaryJoan so much, and why she was the first person that popped into my head when we created this program, as somebody that would be really valuable for UConn students to meet and interact with. And I should mention that part of the work that MaryJoan and I are doing at UConn has yet to be realized because of COVID. And because of students being released early from campus, just when people were really starting to do the hands-on work at farms. So what we did this spring was really introduced MaryJoan into 4 different classrooms and have her do some sustained conversations with 2 of those classes, and then have 2 of the other classes just be a sort of one-time lecture. And this fall, the plan is to do a farm exchange program in September on a weekend. And we're coordinating with the student-run farm on Route 32. And the plan is to invite a variety of students who are interested, including from the 4 classes this spring, but also Echo House and students from the institutes. There's also, I teach a migrant workers class in the fall. So the plan is to really invite any students who want to the student-run farm. We'll invite the guys from Glastonbury out and the owners. And we'll have them, we'll give them a tour of some of the self-sustaining projects of the student-run farm, which we think that the guys will be pretty interested in, because a lot of them also have small plots back home, and some of these projects that students have come up with are pretty simple to put together, water purification and, cultivating local edible plants and, getting off the grid in inexpensive ways. And then have a meal together and potentially design at least one conversation around plants they have back home that they use for traditional remedies and applications, and then plants that we have at the farm that are also sort of can be used again in sort of home remedies and applications. So that was one idea we had. But then we'll do a reverse visit, right, in which students who want to will be bused to the Glastonbury farms during harvest season on the weekend, and they'll be asked to really pick squash, pumpkins alongside the guys for a few hours, put some elbow grease in, and then again, have a meal, have a tour of the farm, have them talk to the owners. And we want to make sure that the guys have an opportunity to be the experts and to be doing the teaching and the educating. We don't want just to UConn to be saying, these are the amazing projects that we've come up with as faculty and students. We want students to go to the farm and have the guys be the ones who are the experts and saying, this is how the harvesting is done, and this is what the work is, and this is how you do it. So we wanted to, that was an important part of that planning process. So for that piece, the plan is for me to actually go with MaryJoan out to the farms late July, early August, and meet with a select group of the men and with the owners, and really make sure it stays on their radar screen, and to make sure that we get the release time for the guys to be at UConn and for us to be there. So that's what's yet to come. And we were hoping to do it at the end of August, but then when we realized students were being released August 17th from campus, we're like, this is just not going to work. So then the spring, just to talk briefly, the documentary that MaryJoan really helped happen got an award by the New Yorker magazine and is now up on their website, Guanajuato Norte, it's called. So that documentary was assigned to all 4 of the classrooms that had MaryJoan visiting. And so she was able to contextualize her work within that 26-minute documentary. The classes were Rodolfo Fernandez's class on Mexican history. So one of the things that was valuable about that class for them to even think about the fact that there's Mexicans in Connecticut, like they're studying Mexican history, but they're like, wait, oh yeah, there's actually Mexican migration that's ongoing. History is not in the past. Another class was Samuel Martinez teaches an anthropology class on migration. So for him, it was really valuable to have students asking MaryJoan about the work she does in men arriving at the border, crossing the border, arriving in Connecticut, sort of what that migration pattern looks like today from an anthropological perspective. My 2 classes were human rights at the US-Mexico border. narratives of immigration, and also socializing for immigrant justice. And what was beautiful about having MaryJoan participate multiple times in the Human Rights on the Mexico Border class is that she was at the border in February, late February, early March. So it was remarkable to have someone on the ground during the semester who was able to come back and share with us photographs and tell us stories about what she saw happening right now this very semester on the ground. And another really valuable thing about that class was that she connected us to other activists who also zoomed in to speak to that class, which was also open to the general public, those classes. And Alvaro Enciso is a Colombian American artist who actually creates and paints crosses, works with border data to find out exactly where bodies have fallen. And he goes to those coordinates and actually plants crosses in the ground for people that have fallen in the desert. He works with No More Deaths as well. And then Sister Betsy Flynn is part of a non.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I just wanted to show a little bit of Alvaro's work. This is a necklace. And if you see the maps that Humane Borders and No More Deaths puts up maps of where most of the deaths occur, where all the deaths occur in the Tucson sector and west. There's little red dots on the map. And so what Alvaro decided to do was make these necklaces using the tin from tuna fish cans that we bring back from the desert. So he brings them home, cleans them up, cuts perfect circles. So this piece of it is from a tuna can, the tan piece, and then the red, he takes another piece of tin, paints it red, because he thought that every single person who's died in the desert who's identified by a red dot should be carried around in somebody's neck. So I just wanted to interrupt a little bit, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture of Alvaro's wooden hand-painted crosses because they're amazing, and he's had to teach the people that go with him how to dig holes and put concrete in, so it's a little bit more difficult for vandals to vandalize the crosses that he puts out there. They can't just pull them up out of the ground because they're stuck in cement. So, all right, sorry. So yeah, that was one person that got to present to class, and Anne's going to tell you about the second person.
Or maybe you should tell them about Betsy, because you know her better than I do.
Betsy Flynn is a real hot ticket. She's a nun in her 80s, and she works with a group of other nuns who run a little respite, and it's not little, it's a big respite program down on the Brownsville border with Matamoros and Brownsville. And she presented 2 winters ago at another committee that I'm on, and I wanted to really go down with them. I was supposed to go down with them to Matamoros last spring, but the virus hit and she was literally on lockdown for a year. She couldn't go anywhere. So I never made it to Matamoros or Brownsville, but instead we just brought her via Zoom. We brought Betsy to Anne's class so that she could share a little bit about the Human Respite Center in McAllen, Brownsville, and Matamoros. And at that time there was, on the Mexico side, there was a migrant tent city of over 1,000 migrants who were there just waiting for their asylum hearings. You know, all the ones that got kicked back to Mexico were hanging out in really, really rough conditions in tent city in Matamoros. And Betsy was able to share that.
And Betsy lives in Connecticut.
Yeah, so yeah. She lives in Windsor, in a retired community of nuns, and really wasn't allowed to come out. I threatened a couple of times to come break her out, but she said, no, we'll both get in trouble. So, because she really wanted to come with me to Nogales at the end of February, but she couldn't. And it was really tough for her to stay behind.
Yeah, and we were hoping to bring her to campus, which of course didn't happen either. But just for future reference. So I had a really rich semester in having MaryJoan in my classroom multiple times, sharing our slides with the border. Having Betsy zoom into the class, Alvaro talking about art on the border, and Alvaro's talk was really just remarkable because he talked about his own journey as a poor Colombian who was forced to migrate out of need, and just his his feelings for all the people that were crossing the desert and the solidarity he felt as a Latino American. It was just beautiful. And so the last class was actually on some level inspired by MaryJoan. I taught a new 1 credit class this semester, in part motivated by the minor that Jason put together actually in in organizing for social justice. So I had a graduating senior who needed to do a community project, but I had also known about Hartford Deportation Defense Team from MaryJoan. And so through her, I was able to connect to people at Hartford Deportation Defense, and between Grace Lemire, the student, and MaryJoan's connections, I was able to create this 1 credit class in which my students would be in direct service to Hartford Deportation Defense. And so we also brought MaryJoan in to talk about migration, to talk about border crossing, to talk about her work here in Glastonbury. And she was really just a beautiful, shining example of how one woman show really can get the work done and can do sort of broad collaborative work in multiple areas. And students were so inspired that one of them, Diana Velasco, decided to build out an entire day for the Human Rights Symposium week to look at human rights on the border. So that was a really powerful day, actually, inspired by the class. So the Hartford Deportation Defense Team was thrilled by the end of the semester that we had 20 students that were doing direct volunteer work for them. That was everything from court accompaniment to translation of documents to fundraising to social media postings. And we now have a summer intern that's placed there, and we're talking about what a fall might look like with Hartford Deportation Defense. And Stefan from C4D/Hartford Deportation Defense also was talking about maybe creating a club of students that might be interested in doing things like court accompaniment, that it doesn't have to be a course every semester, because I can't teach a course every semester, but right. So we're in conversation about that as well. But so in terms of, Jason's desire to hear us talk about sort of ongoing embedded after effects, right, of this semester, El Instituto now has a much deeper relationship with Hartford Deportation Defense. We are in ongoing conversations. We will be trying to place interns there on a fairly regular basis through Latino and Latin American studies. We will be doing this fall program. I do hope to work with MaryJoan every fall now with my migrant farm workers course. And yeah, I look forward to other creative possibilities. MaryJoan and I have also been in conversations about liaisoning with the School of Social Work as well. And MaryJoan's also expressed an interest in taking students to the border or working with us with a border program. And in fact, this Friday, I've been invited to a meeting with Marco Mar Velasquez and Kathy Libal about a possible border program. And so more to come on that, but it would be wonderful if we could continue to work with MaryJoan to try to develop a border studies program that would benefit hopefully hundreds of UConn students over time, maybe undergrads and social work students alike.
Yes, thank you, Anne. In some ways, I feel like it's just the beginning. You reached out and this really worked out, and I'm very, very grateful. And also just the part about being able to touch a student's life at this point in their lives. This is about the students. It's not about any of us. It's about the students. It's about the message, and it's about the work that has to get done. And we have all these wonderful young adults out there who really, really want to make a change. And it's wonderful to see, and it's wonderful to collaborate with them. And the other kind of side project is I do buy things in Nogales when I'm there, like handmade bracelets that the women in the women's shelter make. I buy them there, bring them back, sell them, so they actually get the money twice. And then there's a couple gentlemen from Southern Mexico, and I think one from Honduras, that in their time stuck in Mexico, just waiting, they took up painting, artists. They're like self-taught artists. And I have a couple of their pieces just because I buy them from them, so they get the American money right then and there that helps them, but then I bring them back to sell. And my problem is I can't bring a lot back when I come back. So I have a private message Facebook connection with one of them who has another connection with a guy on the Nogales, Arizona side that could actually get to the post office and mail me some, but it has to be from the US post office because we don't even bother with the Mexico post office. That would just be futile. But this is a picture. This is an example of Luis Sotero's work. It's a wooden cross, you know, with different scenes of the desert. And of course, Mary's really big with them. So, so this cross used to go for $20 now, probably up to 25, but I can only carry a few at a time because I don't want to crush them or scratch them or break them on the way back. So I'm going to be asking this other gentleman in Nogales, Arizona, if he can pack some up and send them. And, you know, it's just another piece. It's another piece of the puzzle. Louis also did this one my last time in February. I trying to carry this through the airport. It's this desert scene of a couple of migrants walking, but he put a burro in there as like a satire, like a joke, because one of the less than nice names they get called by Border Patrol or any other people that feel like they can degrade these people, one of the names they're called is burro. Oh, here's another burro coming. So he decided to just paint one in there as a joke, but you really do not see burros on the trails. So that was his way of expressing himself. This I bought from Louis for twice the price because he was really trying to make his rent in a little room he was renting in Nogales on the Mexico side. And he really just wants, in a very humble way, get his name out there. And as people pass through and visit the shelters and people who are doing an immersion border experience, he connects with them. And of course, everyone wants to bring something home and say, look what this person created. And they're sharing part of their lives. And that's a very vulnerable place for them to put themselves in, you know, and to receive that and all the respect and compassion that it's meant for is really a gift. So, and you're all a gift. So I'm very happy and grateful to be part of this. And again, it's for the students and it's for the work that has to get done moving forward. And now some days I don't feel so discouraged anymore when I have Professor Ann right by my side. And, you know, sometimes bureaucracy and other things can get in the way of things, but you plow ahead, no pun intended, Luke, you plow ahead and plant those seeds because, you know, I thought back in April, I thought I had an eye on an apartment in Nogales that I could use to bring students to, but for various reasons that ended up not being a very good idea. So I had to let the apartment go. But there'll be other places to bring people when we're able to do an immersion project. So God bless, namaste.
Thank you so much, guys, for the beautiful rendering of the work that you've done. And, you know, I woke up to the world at the US-Mexico border. And I think, you know, developing a border studies program at UConn is very fitting for the kind of work that needs to happen and the ways that that we can situate, you know, where we are and in Connecticut as a place that is intertwined, to use Luke's web metaphor, with the rest of the world. And when we make those connections, we, you know, develop a better understanding. But as Varun is saying, you can't just understand the world, you have to act in it. And what you all have shown is such, you know, tremendous practical, you know, ways of interacting with communities, addressing problems, and what it actually takes to solve problems. You know, some key things that I've seen in these presentations is the role of the arts. And I think that's really important because in many movements, the arts are a way in which people imagine a future that doesn't exist yet. And those are really important goalposts, psychological, imaginary places that generate the kind of energy necessary to do that difficult work, to make those community connections. Another theme that comes out of all of your work is building infrastructure, right? So I think one of the things that you pointed out, Luke, was, you know, when you have, you know, collective efforts that don't have sustaining, you know, energy, or they don't have ways to build continuity. And so, you know, one of the things that makes change so difficult is the resources required to generate infrastructure to allow these movements to grow, to sustain themselves, and to, as Varun mentioned, to alter power relations. That's ultimately what, you know, what we want to teach students, is that they're not just how to navigate the world and its obstacles, but to be able to change them. And that you really can only do that. The third theme that I heard was personal connections, right? That this has to happen out of dialogue, which involves sharing and listening and reflecting, and then also developing a mutual, collaborative, collective response to action. Those are the ways that that people become aware of their own power. Varun, the three, you know, key learning points of organizing are so essential, and, you know, these are all underscored in the shortcomings of the traditional model of academia. The model of you know, isolated individual research leading to scholarly publication, and then the isolated classroom activities in which you have perhaps, you know, inspiring, you know, understanding of the world, but yet, you know, really needing that kind of real world contact with how do you apply that thinking, and that often comes, you know, in order to do that kind of work, people need to have, you know, engage in self-reflection to understand where they come into play, and so I really appreciate all of you demonstrating what, you know, we have imagined, you know, as a potential path for altering power relations on campus, and how we conduct our research, how we organize our classrooms, and that this is really, you know, a first step in making these connections to, as you all indicated, other communities that are working to make these changes and to do the things that are really necessary, so that when we come to grips with the complicity of our institution, and our own roles in racism, in systemic racism, and that those are opportunities to apply our thinking and to make collective action based on our you know, deeper connections to one another. And we find, I think, that that those are the most rewarding, you know, kinds of work that the university can do. And so with that, you know, I really want to thank everyone. The hour has gone on long, and I also don't want to cut anyone off. If anyone has any thoughts or questions or anything you'd like to share before we end. But this has just been a tremendous, you know, celebration of the work that you've done, and that we will continue. We'll take all these things with us as we move forward. Would anyone like to share anything else before we depart?
just want to thank the program and the residency for allowing me this continuity with my own work from Yukon to Middletown, and the ability to support the communities that I've been involved in along the way.
Mhm. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jason and Ann. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and it's a step going forward. There's more work to do, but it's nice to have a great team to do it with.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, thank you again. I won't take up too much more time, but just yeah, as Luke was saying, let us know if there are ways we can support future, activists and residents, or just connect. And I look forward to hopefully, being back in person at some point in schools.
Yes.
And so, would be more than I know. Anne, thank you for reaching out to me. I know this year was crazy with my job at C4D, and I wasn't able to join you this semester, but would love to plug in when possible in the future. And just really excited about the border studies program. When I was teaching high school, Jay, I don't know if y'all know this. I launched ethnic studies program at the high school where I taught. And my goal, my EVO plan, was to begin teaching Asian. I had approval for Asian American studies this year, and then the next one was border studies for high school students, because it's not just college students that need this; it's high school students, middle school, elementary school, and so I'm just really excited about the work you're all doing, and I'll definitely be sharing with the Homeland Security series. We're collecting the final bios and headshots and gonna get some promo materials out soon. So I'll make sure to invite you all so you can share that and join us in celebrating queer and trans undocumented artists. Yeah, no, just thank you.
One more big thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
Courtney, I wouldn't be sitting here without all of Courtney's technological help in getting me on board with my computer paperwork. It was
You're welcome.
wonderful to work. It was wonderful to work with you, Courtney. You're part of this team as well, and thank you again for your patience and helping me.
No problem. I'm happy to help. And it was very nice to see all the presentations and kind of see the end results of, like MaryJoan is saying, the frustrating at times paperwork and things like that. And happy to see you all. Thank you.
Mhm.
I gotta sign off. Take care, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. All right, we'll be in touch.
Bye.
I can't think of three better people to launch this program as examples of what this program could be and is.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and I second that thank you to Courtney. It was amazing all semester. So, yes, thank you.
Yeah, we have a good team.
We do. And thank you, Jason, for really having this vision and putting it together and sticking it out and going to the dean and making sure we got money and while you're trying to also be on sabbatical. Of
Yeah,
course.
I was just gonna say, Jason, you need to. When is the sabbatical actually happening?
Well, there's no sabbatical from the movement. So we're doing good work, pushing some legislation to, try to get some support for the work that you've been doing in the high schools. It's really, what it's taught me is, laws, sometimes people lead and the laws catch up. Sometimes the laws lead and then the people take over. But there is a kind of public energy that's generated when you try to make legislative reform. And we thought that was a good way to catalyze more community organizing and to use people's interest in the schools and to bring into light the conversation about equity, diversity, ethnic studies in our public schools, because it too easily gets tossed around and nothing happens. But also that it gets under attack, and that people will, just the mildest forms of diversifying a curriculum, spark, white outrage. And, we thought that what we really needed to do was we needed to empower and educate parents, students, teachers, administrators, right, to bring in all the different parts of the school system from different parts of the state to get them engaged in the conversation so that they're leading and not reacting. So we should keep talking, Varun. I want to learn the lessons you've learned from your work in the schools, because I know it's a long road, but I couldn't have focused on all this stuff had I been teaching my classes and running to meetings or whatever. So it was actually a really nice way to just get grounded with people and do that work.
And please get rest too.
Yeah, I have my garden in the backyard. We've been working. Yeah, which is sustaining for me.
Well, I should run, but
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Guys, thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you.
All right. Yep, we'll be in touch. Take care, y'all.
Jason, have you been invited to this Friday meeting, by the way?
Which Friday meeting? The Frank Tuitt one?
No. Mark Armar Velasquez and Kathy Libal are cooking up some kind of border program that they've already run by Ngozi, the new person in charge of education abroad.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time I'm being invited to the table, and which, because, I had separate conversations with Study Abroad about our border program, and a year ago,